Well, it took a while, but the Celtics finally got something in return for Gordon Hayward. We were waiting to see if they were going to get anything in a sign-and trade from Charlotte, and we finally got it. So the Celtics threw in 2 second-round picks with Hayward for around the $30 million trade exception from Charlotte. I believe the trade exception expires in about 1 year from now, so they're going to use it. You don't just throw in 2 second-round picks for a trade exception that you're not going to use. So the Celtics will make a move, but what will this move be? Now, I went on the salaries of the NBA and I looked at some players that I thought they could get for under $30 million, because if they want to be real contenders, they're going to need another piece, especially after losing Hayward, especially after we just found out that Kemba is going to be missing a lot of time. He's had these knee problems really ever since the All-Star break last season, and we just found out that he could be out till mid-January, that's tough for them. So, the players I think they are most likely to get for under $30 million, I think the guy they're most likely to trade for is Evan Fournier, another shooter for them, which they need. He might come off the bench, he might start, I don't know what they would do with him. But you could see the Magic not wanting to keep his $17 million on the book and look to move him, especially since the Magic are just stuck in this, make the 8th seed and lose in the first round every year, that they could look to move Evan Fournier. And I think the Celtics would gladly take him. Maybe $17 million, is that an overpay for him? It doesn't really matter, to be honest, because you have $30 million in trade exception that you have to use on somebody. And they were rumored to get Fournier in a 3-team trade when they were talking with Indiana at first, so I think Evan Fournier is one of the more likely cases for them. I hope Danny Ainge isn't crazy enough to think about a Marcus Aldridge trade, because I just see that fit being terrible. They need defense and rebounding out of the center position, and Marcus Aldridge doesn't give you any of those anymore. And I don't like the idea of taking the ball out of Kemba, Jaylen Brown, and Jason Tatum's hands and putting it into LA's in the post, especially when he's not much of a three-point shooter. I really hope we wouldn't do that. I hope we're not crazy enough to trade for Al Horford. I mean, he was atrocious last year. Now, maybe the Celtics think they can get Al Horford back to his old self when he was with Boston. That was the last time we saw him be really good. And Al Horford could give them that defense that they were really missing at times. But I just don't see them. I mean, maybe unless the Thunder throw in more assets with Horford. But I don't know why the Thunder would do that, so I'm good on Al Horford. Maybe a guy like Harrison Barnes from the Kings, or a guy like Buddy Hield from the Kings. I think the Kings are going to be big sellers this offseason, especially with, once again, the rumors of Buddy Hield. They let Bogdanovich walk, and Harrison Barnes just kind of seems like the odd man out. He's making $22 million this year, and I think the Celtics could jump right on that. Harrison Barnes has been thrown around in trades for a long time now, and I think, honestly, he's a great fit. I think he would be the easiest fit of any player they could trade for. He could slide right into those Hayward minutes and run the 4, run with the bench unit, play the 3. He can guard multiple positions. He doesn't need the ball in his hand. He was able to be productive alongside those great Warriors teams. So I think Harrison Barnes would be a really good fit for them. Maybe not the best player they could get, but probably the best fit. What do you think the chances are that one of the Indiana players are still on the table? I highly doubt it, because I don't see how you would end up trading for VO or Miles Turner when you could have just in the first place for Hayward. And they didn't make that trade because they felt like $18 million for Miles Turner was not worth it, and that Indiana wouldn't want to give Oladipo. So I see almost no way they make this move, but I think it still has to be said that the Indiana guys are on the table. Maybe Julius Randle. He's making $18.9 million. The Knicks just drafted Obi Toppin. Julius Randle was questionable at times last year, and the Knicks may look to move him to open up those minutes. The only question about that is the fit again with the Celtics, because his defense just isn't quite there, and his offense at times can be kind of painful to watch. He likes to bring the ball up the court. He's not that great of a shooter, more of a low post player, but playing alongside the amount of playmakers and the amount of scorers the Celtics have, you wouldn't see him bring the ball up the floor, and I think it would open up the game more. But it's still an awkward fit. But I wouldn't hate it, a Julius Randle trade. I would love an Aaron Gordon trade, but I doubt that happens. Just because Orlando seems really hesitant to trade Aaron Gordon. There were rumors they would try to trade Gordon for a top pick. That never happened. They apparently turned down a first round pick from the Blazers for Aaron Gordon. They turned that down. And it just seems like the Magic are not in any rush to make a move. And if they were to make a move, it would be more of a guy like Evan Fournier than Aaron Gordon. Just because Aaron Gordon is making similar money and seems to have, more potential. He's younger, fits the timeline more than Evan Fournier would. Now, those are the more expensive guys, but they don't have to use these $30 million on one of those more expensive guys. They could use it to get somebody on more of a rookie contract or somebody making under 10 mil. The problem with that is obviously the lower amount of money, usually the players aren't as good, and if somebody is good enough for you to want to trade for, that's making not a lot of money, the team that has him probably won't like to trade them. Making around $16 million, maybe they go after Clint Capella for that center. People thought they were going to get Clint last offseason or at the deadline this season, but it never happened. And especially with Atlanta having all these big men like Collins, they drafted Okongwu, signed Gallinari. Maybe Capella's the odd man out, which is kind of weird to say because Capella got traded for and actually hasn't played a game for Atlanta. So, that would be like a Carmelo Anthony kind of stay in Atlanta. Maybe Thaddeus Young from the Bulls. The Bulls were looking to move Thaddeus Young. He's making around $13.5 million this year, about $14 million next year. Thaddeus Young's just kind of a winning player for them. Not on the Bulls because the Bulls don't win, but in his career, Thaddeus Young just does a lot that you don't really put on paper. He can pretty much do it all from the four. Sometimes the Bulls have tried to run him at small forward, which doesn't really work. But I think if you put him in Boston, he could come off the bench, or maybe even start at the beginning of the season for them, and just give you solid production. And that's all Thaddeus Young is. Solid. I think a rare kind of shot in the dark could be Christian Wood. Houston would have to implode for this to happen and have to blow it up. But if they do blow it up, Christian Wood is a good trade piece for them. He's making $13 million this year. He's making up to $14 in 2023. And, Christian Wood could run the center, can run the four, can stretch the floor. Christian Wood is a nice player that the Celtics were looking to acquire this offseason. And, they never did. He ended up going to Houston, but maybe his stay in Houston is short term. Maybe he ends up finding his way to Boston. JJ Redick seems kind of like another outside shot just because he is so old, and I don't know if the Celtics would want to invest in an older player for $13 million and probably another piece. But at the end of the day, they need shooting, and the Pelicans are trying to get younger. And JJ Redick is obviously way older than everyone else on that roster. They just traded Drew Holiday to get younger, so JJ Redick could be the next one out. I talked about Indiana already. TJ Warren making 11.7. Once again, don't think it'll happen, but I think it is worth saying. PJ Tucker worth $8 million, another Houston player that could be on the move. PJ Tucker is a player that really every team should want. PJ Tucker played center for the Rockets and held his own. And obviously PJ Tucker gives you that grit and grind, gives you that defense, can play multiple positions and can guard multiple positions. And that's another player that I think for the Celtics could split minutes between starting and coming off the bench and fill a void that's been missing for them. Derrick Rose for $7.6 million. I don't know what the Celtics would have to give up in return with that trade exception to get D Rose, or what the Pistons would be looking for. But Derrick Rose off the bench would be really nice for them. I know they just, drafted Peyton Pritchard, signed Jeff Teague, but at the end of the day, with Kemba's injuries, you might want another point guard, and there's no guarantee that Peyton Pritchard is good. Jeff Teague, you can live with not getting minutes. Derrick Rose, I think, would be a steal for them, but I don't know if it happens. I think those are the main players they can trade for. I don't really see anybody else that I think is like a realistic option or somebody they'd really even want. So, yeah, the Celtics will make a move with this $30 million trade exception, whether it's this year. They could wait till next offseason if they want. Maybe they do it at the deadline. I'm not too sure, but they will make a move, and it'll be a pretty big one because, once again, $30 million trade exception, you're going to use that on a good player, and that's exactly what the Celtics need.